I have said that democracy is a condition for the birth of philosophy, I cannot say, I did not say that democracy is a constant condition for the existence of philosophy. For example, Descartes or Pascal are in a political situation which is not at all a democratic state. It's monarchy, absolutism, and so on. So, but in the origin, the birth of philosophy, there is something like a democratic condition to the existence of philosophy. And during all the history of philosophy, this primitive condition has some effects. And you have effects of this primitive relationship between democracy and philosophy, even when the concrete circumstances are not democratic at all. And it's not only the case in China or in other countries, but also in the Western world. During the medieval sequence, during the classical sequence, and so on. But we can find in Descartes, but maybe in Thomas too, in the medieval circumstances, we can find traces of the primitive relationship between democracy as a form of state and philosophy.
Yes, a dialectical part. Without a dialectical discussion, which we are typical for the Greek and not just the Greek democracy, for the Greek people, you know, go to a Greek family, they're always fighting with each other. This is the basis of Western philosophy. And I would be very, Confucius was a wise man, a great thinker, but not a philosopher in the Western. Then I think it's important to acknowledge, and then we can talk, maybe even start a philosophical discussion with Confucius.
But for example, in the theological framework, in the medieval situation, for example, if you propose to give a proof of the existence of God, it's something democratic. Because it's not only a question of power or faith. It's a question of discussion, if you give a proof. And in fact, there is discussion of the proof. And you can say the proof is not good, and so on. And so you are in a space which is not purely an authoritarian space. Even in the condition of medieval world, which is not at all a democratic world.
Okay. Slavoj, I can sit down.
Very short. I think basically the same problem bothers me as the one raised by the last question. How should I put it? Which democracy is the condition of philosophy? Because you mentioned different dimensions of democracy. At to be Platonic, the lowest end, democracy of the simple freedom of opinions. Then, democracy as a state form. Democracy as this opening towards the future, and so on and so on.
No, not so on.
Okay. My point is, but is it possible to imagine democracy deprived of its lowest moment, this the most stupid freedom of opinions, still being condition of philosophy? In other words, you played with the terms truth. Truth can be with Deleuze, life, and so on. Now, what if we replace democracy with enlightened absolutism, enlightened terror? Does it still work, enlightened terror as condition for philosophy, which keeps precisely the features of democracy that you wanted as a condition for philosophy, which is in enlightened terror you have accessibility to everyone, and so on and so on. So my point is, or do you accept a more radical paradox that philosophy ultimately has to rely precisely on that contingent, vulgar element of opinions that it counteracts?
No, I think there is a constant transformation during history of the relationship between democracy and philosophy as a condition. Because the point is not here definition of democracy as in the political field. The question is definition of democracy as a condition for the birth and finally for existence of philosophy. And it's we have different contexts, in fact. Primitively, at the birth of philosophy, finally, democracy is a necessity as a form of state with a certain freedom of discussion. And more precisely, the question of arguments and proofs. I insist on this point. Is much more the question of mathematics, proofs, arguments, and so on, than the pure freedom of opinions, which is a condition of philosophy. And after that, there is many possibilities of existence of democracy as a condition of philosophy, and it's a possibility that the terrorist form of democracy, which exists naturally in the French Revolution from the very beginning, has also something to do as a condition for philosophy. I think, for example, that a part of the work of Hegel is under the condition of the French Revolution, and in fact, under also the terrorist sequence of the French Revolution as a democratic framework, because it has a form of radical equality before death, finally, but equality. You know the famous pages of Hegel on this point in the French Revolution. So, to finish this point, the relationship between democracy and philosophy, when democracy is a condition of philosophy, it's dependent of the variation of the democratic context under the different sequences of politics.
And the enlightened terrorist, I always thought that is another name for a philosopher. Enlightened terrorist, is that